All right, so I think this will be the most exciting panel that you've seen today. I might be a little bit biased, but the expertise that we have on the panel, the diverse thoughts that will come through as we explore the topic of what, why, how, and when we think about AI and generative AI and how that is transforming globally in terms of deal flows, in terms of use cases, and the value that it's driving to the world economies. Now, from ASEAN's business-friendly approach to AI regulation, to big tech leaders investing in this space, Visa, fun fact, has been a pioneer in using AI and neural networks since 1993 in the world of payments. In the last 10 years, we have invested close to $3 billion to make sure our risk products are absolutely at par when you have a buying decision that needs to be made. So let's kick off. Let's talk about the why and where. And Pinn, I'll start with you with a global perspective. Are there any specific bright spots of innovation to address specifically contextual challenges that you see? And in which areas do you believe in this region will probably come out as a global leader in itself?
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. So, a quick intro. I'm a Pinn and I'm a partner at Lightspeed, based in Singapore. Lightspeed is probably the only global venture firm today that has presence in all of the global tech hub. And we're a multi-stage early to growth investor in venture investing all around the world. So with that as a context, actually, this is a really timely conference because I just returned from our global annual AGM where we really had kind of demonstration and a show of what's happening around the world. So as it relates to AI or Lightspeed, has been investing behind two themes. One is data sovereignty. We've invested in companies like Mistral in Europe, in Savam in India, and also looking for more opportunities to invest behind independent LLM models in China. So that's been one theme. And the other theme, really, thesis that we have is actually, a lot of it's around this idea of the region or the country is going to do with AI what they have traditionally done 10 times or 100 times better, right? So if you think about India, it used to be the technical outsourcing center for the world, right? So behind that, we invested in a company like Gushwork.ai to kind of reinvent the AI version of tech outsourcing center. In the US, obviously, they've been a big powerhouse of robotics. So we have invested in companies like Skilled.ai that are LLM fine-tuned to robotics. In China, obviously, it's been a big, manufacturing hub for most form factors, new form factors, whether you're going to call it desktop or mobile, and every generation of that. So, we've invested behind companies like JBD, which is probably going to be today the only manufacturer of AR lenses, right? So I guess investing behind this idea that the form factor of glasses will be the one that bring AI to reality or more consumer adoption. So in that format, then you need a very, very different display technology, and so we've invested and been really fortunate to invest behind that company. Yeah, so that's what I've been seeing all around the world.
And then obviously in Asia, the digital infrastructure, adoption readiness, literacy, lots of operational quirks. So my question then, Kasima, you and Susli, how do you think about in Southeast Asia? How is it different, and how's the spotlight shifting to the east?
Yeah, so I think the opportunity here is massive, right? Most of the world's population is in Asia. And I think there's a huge opportunity here, but I also think that there's a huge challenge to try to adapt it and localize it into the region, which is the thing that my team is focusing on at SCB 10X. So as we look into how we localize into the region, it's a very different. You have all these non-native English speakers, and the models work really well in English, and so there's this big challenge to try to get effort here, and AI development ultimately is so capital intensive that I think a lot of that focus into the East is coming into the opportunity, but also looking at the possibility of how we get these models working well, sort of natively and localized here. And I mean, one thing that's interesting for the work that we do is that localization perspective is fundamentally different than what localization used to look like when we came to software, adapting software, turning microtext into a local language or doing date formats. I mean, with the AI stuff that's happening here, adapting into a local context and localization is really about language and culture.
Yeah.
Language is fundamentally cultural. So it's a much bigger challenge, I think.
Tell me, Susli, what do you think? Do you agree?
Well, just to contextualize some of my comments, I think similar to Pinn, I also come from a venture capital firm. Monksel Ventures invest in early stage startup focused on Southeast Asia. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be through the lens of what we've seen in Southeast Asia, what's been applicable, and what's been some of the implications of global development. I think we were talking about this a little bit during the prep about how you see a proliferation when it comes to AI in Southeast Asia. The entry point seems to always be customer service chatbots, right? We talked about this, and we've seen, I think, a lot of companies trying to build either that as a feature or sometimes as a product in of itself. And I think that brings me to sort of a general observation that the value proposition of AI in Southeast Asia, I think, is fundamentally going to look quite different than in some other markets. And so I think a PwC report a couple years ago sort of tried to crystal ball where AI is going to be driving economic growth and value. And a lot of that they were predicting would accrue to North America and China. Right, and you can sort of see why that's the case, because that's where a lot of the foundational models are being built, a lot of talent, research, and I think the very innovative, cutting-edge technology is being built. So then for us, when we look at the opportunity set in Southeast Asia, is always, so what is it that's going to come out of Southeast Asia? And I think what Kasima said about localization, about not necessarily general models, but domain-specific AI application, I think would be very interesting. When I talk to founders, they often talk about, we have proprietary data, right? Like we have proprietary information that's going to help us train a model that's going to be applied in a very specific way, and that's how you monetize. And I think that brings it back to sort of this broader question of what is the value proposition of AI? So what I've seen from where I sit is, in addition to sort of the customer experience chatbots, it's been AI being used to do pattern seeking. And this has been certainly true in AI in healthcare in terms of diagnostics. I've seen companies built around using AI to do ultrasound specifically for certain types of diseases, or AI to do oncology sort of early detection, because they sit on, again, proprietary Asian patient data, for instance, which is not being used necessarily to train general models elsewhere. So this has been some of the applications that I've seen that I think would be quite interesting to see the development of.
I totally get that. In Visa, although we are a global payments company, a lot of the products are deployed globally. The challenge where we see is what is fit for purpose in local markets. So we launched this accelerator program a few years ago, and this year, a lot of the challenge statements we have put out is around AI and generative AI. The applications that have come through are more chatbot-oriented, customer service-oriented, but there are a couple diamonds in there that look at large language models and small language models on transaction enrichment. If you think about your statements that you receive today, whether it's bank statements or card statements, there's a lot of truncated words and artificial digits there that you can't really make sense what that is. So more to come in that as we go into working with a lot of these startups and where we go. Kasima, you started talking about building on Asia's AI funding landscape. There's a lot of also buzz around AI, and we spoke about this during the break, and its potential to disrupt various industries. But in your opinion, what are some of the most overhyped aspects of it, and what's sort of real? Let's keep it real.
Maybe I wouldn't go with overhyped, but maybe I would go with maybe very aspirational for the phase that things are. If we put it in the context of the work that we do, specifically, we're building a series of open source large language models optimized for Thai, right? And at the end of the day, when we talk to customers or potential users and developers, they immediately go to things like chatbot, right? But the tools aren't quite there yet, right? To get these models working well in a local language, right? So I think maybe walking before running, I think is sort of the way I look at it in terms of overhyped. And so going to what might be considered unseen opportunities, I think it's more the foundational work, right? So we're not the only ones that are doing work like this. I know there are multiple organizations in the region that are trying to adapt global models into local context and trying to get it working well in local language, local culture, local knowledge. And I think that's the kind of work that maybe we need to do before we get to some of the stuff that people are really excited about, that ultimately the subtext in when people get excited about it, the subtext is that it's for English models or using English models, right? And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to look into the foundational work. And then there's like really early stuff to do, I was just telling you this earlier, we were talking to one of the big newspapers in Thailand, and one of the things that they're excited about to try to get as an AI tool is basically a grammar checker. Right? And so the existing models that work well in English, and sometimes they work well in other languages too, they either don't work well enough or they're too expensive. And so adapting those sort of foundational tech into the local context, I think, is like the real opportunity right now for the region.
It's fantastic. And I want to come back to you, Susli, on Southeast Asia. But Pinn, we spoke about as part of the prep on India and China. And you were very excited about what you're seeing there. What are you seeing there that's sort of what Kasima is also alluding to in terms of localization? What's relevant at the foundational level? Are you seeing that coming out of those markets?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot, LLMs specific, like really foundational LLMs built for India. China, actually, a little bit of a different dynamic, because actually the Baidu's, and financial, so it's not really startup, but they are the one today that is building against these opportunities. And fun fact, actually, after GPT-4o, the next 3 best LLMs are actually all being built in China at the moment, right? Which is crazy. No one talks about them, but I think we just cannot deny. I mean, political differences aside, right? I think we just can't deny their contribution to this new age, new innovation. So that's on the LLM front. But again, right in China, we've been with a lot of folks trying to apply, think about new form factors, devices. Really very hardware focused technology. So that's also really interesting in China and India as well. Yeah.
And as we think about Southeast Asia, Susli, the AI landscape as it's going to mature, what are some of the key drivers necessary, you think, that will accelerate this phenomenon? And any roles that you see collaboration required across corporates, startups, governments? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I think a lot of the necessary conditions isn't specific to AI per se, right? What we face in the region is, generally speaking, access to digital kind of tools, the relative cost of it vis-a-vis alternatives, the level of maturity in terms of the talent to deploy some of those tools and then really adopt it. I think, generally speaking, I would say that we're probably not quite where some of the other frontier markets are in terms of readiness for AI. And then often when I speak to companies, both enterprise and startups, the way they think about AI, I think is still relatively early in the specifics of, how it feels a little bit more like a feature, right? It feels like it's being used in a way where it's making an existing product or solution sort of better, but not necessarily rewriting and disrupting things. Now, to be fair, right, AI didn't just exist 2 years ago. It's been around for a long time, and a lot of the companies that we've also invested in, have been working on some version of AI fairly early on. So I think we need to also be very clear about when we talk about AI, it's not just Gen AI, for instance, right? We've got natural language processing, we've got speech recognition, voice, all that good stuff. And in fact, GPT-4 Omni just came out, and it's like an agglomeration of all those different things. So, to me, it comes back to what are the real problems that AI can solve in Southeast Asia, where relative cost of labor is still low. And so automation, cost efficiency, et cetera, isn't necessarily top of mind, frankly, as a winning sort of selling point. What is winning, I think, is the ability to grow your top line, open new revenue channels, increase conversion across your funnel, whatever you're selling, as well as reducing human error, right? Particularly in certain businesses where that's costly. So for instance, if you're financial institutions, you're doing collection, the way people react in those heated environment, maybe that could be done by AI better. And that's not necessarily cost savings, that's giving your customer a better experience.
So that's a great segue into our next part, that let's talk about the hows, right? So Pinn, if you think about the companies you look at where AI is a feature versus fundamentally AI integrated companies, how do you assess the readiness of a AI startup with capabilities on a broader application level? How do you view that judgment?
Interesting. Broad application, like consumer application.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'll separate the question in two parts. One is, how do we know if this is just an AI as a feature versus fundamentally a different experience? So, obviously, I think assessing the technology to, really understand what the role of AI play in delivering the solution is one. And a lot of us, at least a lot of my work, we invest really early on. So it's really, paper and pen. A lot of the product actually is not even, commercialized. At best, we're at a prototype situation. So I think that's really still really qualitative, and a lot of discussion on what the vision of the founder is and why is this important. So there's one element, and the other thing that we actually always do a lot when we invest into, I guess every .ai company now, it's we do a lot of technical diligence with the founders and the team. Not to belittle anybody, but today, real AI expertise really lie in few rather than many, right? So, we look into, what research they have done, how many citations, what did it really do? I think real AI expertise is what we really look for, right? Because they're going to be foundational. So that's on the talent piece. And I think on the, and I'll separate that for consumer application. Lightspeed, obviously, we have a long-standing history of investing in SaaS, and over the course of the 1 decade, they've been around. We've been a lot more famous for consumer applications like Snapchat, Oyo Rooms. And so actually we do discuss quite a bit on how what we see today, how would that translate into consumer application? And we came away with two things actually. And if you notice, we actually haven't invested behind too many consumer applications, and that's for two reasons. One is that I think one is what Susli actually talked about, right? Today we use AI, Gen AI, to just make things a lot faster or cheaper, right? And what we actually really want for real consumer innovation or consumer applications actually to make things newer, right? What is the new consumer experience that we really, really can deliver with AI and generative AI technology? So that's one part that I think today we're still quite stuck on just how to use them, use AI to do things faster and cheaper. The other part to this actually that I think many people don't underestimate or maybe are not aware of kind of the pyramid, right? Where investment and value creation are being built today is still at the foundational level and also the developer tool level. In a sense, these tools are still really immature in the grand scheme of things, right? Like we've had, clouds, payment system, developer tools that are just really, relative to what we have today, a lot more mature. And with immaturity, I think there is also a cost element, right? It is still really expensive to run, anything on any models, and obviously every tool is trying to monetize today in this kind of investment environment. So with that as a premise, I think it is still hard to build cheaply on these models. So obviously I think this will change over time with competition, consolidation. I think we're going to see the funnel really flip to this, right? Where the few foundational model left, and then a little bit more developer tools, and then really the consumer application layer really burgeon. But before that, I think it's still going to take some time, right? Like this is not something that you can build over 3 to 5 years.
And we've seen a lot of governments play a proactive role in sort of harboring not just talent, but also establishing frameworks to encourage ethical practices. We are in Singapore now, and Kasima, you and I spoke about how Singapore is taking a much more active role in terms of providing that framework. So love to hear your comments in terms of how that can be thought about for other markets as well.
Yeah, I think Singapore has been exhibiting some really strong leadership in the space with the Gen AI framework and also with the organizations they fund. We work closely with one of these organizations called AI Singapore, and their focus is exactly the same mission that we have, which is, but they're broader. They're on the ASEAN level, where they're trying to adapt models. They're actually trying to build models from scratch for the region. And for Singapore to be sort of the hub of that is really a really clever move strategically. And like they're not the only ones, right? So there's Singapore, and then there's private. There's private companies as well. So you have like Sea or Alibaba, and then of course there's us, SCB 10X, which is trying to push this forward in a way that's like open and transparent. Because I have a really strong belief in open source models being part of this future, and with the way that Singapore set up both AI Singapore and the Gen AI framework, they talk about models for public good, and I think that is like the thing to sort of focus on as we move forward in the region. And
you think that's where the value will also be driven?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at it from the perspective of rising tide raises all ships, that kind of thing. I think this is the play that they're trying to make.
Okay, let's talk about talent for a second. And Susli, major tech firms are pouring a lot of investments here. They're looking to upskill labor force and build a more unified approach to talent development. What's your view on how that's going with a lot of the companies that you see?
Yeah. I think that in addition to Singapore, actually, lots of countries have a national AI strategy or framework. Right, all of the ASEAN countries, for the most part, have one. The extent to which that actually translates to necessarily, real investments, real dollars, real innovation I think, remains to be seen. But the intent certainly is there, and I think governments understand that they need to work with private actors to sort of make sure that they're not left behind, right? Like it's not just about reaping the benefits, but just making sure that they're not subsequently kind of being made obsolete. I think when it comes to talent, most of the public commitments that I've seen have tended towards actually investment into physical infrastructure, right? A lot of it is data center, for instance, in the last few months. Almost all of the big tech companies have committed publicly to putting data centers in various parts of Southeast Asia, not just one country, right? So this is something that's benefiting everyone. In the past, Apple, for instance, in Indonesia, have invested in Developers Academy with the intent of, again, like upskilling talent, et cetera. I'm sort of a bit more sanguine about whether some of these investments have necessarily translated to, a true kind of talent sort of regeneration, if you will. I think it takes a long time, actually, to invest in talent, and it takes more than sort of one or two actors to make that work, right? Where this is going to be interesting, I think, is if governments have policies to attract talent, because I think talent breeds talent. And that's something that, with the exception of Singapore, I don't think the region has been very good at doing. That said, I've always considered Southeast Asia to be one of the most friendly environments for non-Southeast Asians to build. If I talk to any company on any day in Indonesia, right, like half the time it's someone else. They're not from Indonesia, right? And similarly, I think in Thailand, we had a joint kind of event with AWS a couple of months ago, and I was surprised how many non-Thai founders that are there. And so I think, yeah, the more we attract this talent, I
Yeah.
think talent begets talent. And it's important for governments and private actors to work together on that one.
I mean, the other thing I've seen with large corporates, including ourselves, is there is a top-down focus, but there's also bottoms-up. And when we think about large corporations, including ourselves, run massive hackathons, the amount of interest that we get from the employees that are eager to contribute, not just engineers, but business folks, marketing folks that are curious about this space and looking to solve real-world problems, I think that's where rubber hits the road in terms of value. So one of the key jobs as a moderator is to make sure we end on time, so that I'm going to ask you a roundup question, okay, on real-world value. So we got, don't look nervous, it's all right, man. I mean, 2025, okay? Where do you think we're going to be in a, in a conference like this? You're looking back. Where do you think that value is going to be when we think about AI or AGI, wherever you want to take that? Where do you think that value is going to be in the industry? We ask you first, Kasima.
Okay,
You're the expert,
okay.
all right?
I think it's, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a cop-out answer. I think that it's hard for us to tell without going through the phases that we're about to go through. I think I want to build on Susli and Pinn's comments earlier around us not necessarily seeing like maybe what I would call AI native applications yet. But I think what's going to be exciting about the next 2 years is that what we've seen as models coming out of places like OpenAI and Google and Facebook or Meta, I think I sort of consider those research outputs, right? We've sort of seen like very advanced research outputs, but we're about to enter the phase where we get a bunch of product people and engineers involved, and we're gonna see a lot of things go to production, and I think we're gonna go through a lot of these phases where we see some of the things that are more obvious about augmenting our existing workflows, and then we're gonna have sort of like the new ideas that maybe it's hard for us to conceive right now without living in the new workflows or being more accustomed to what the possibilities of what AI, not just LLMs, right, AI in general can do for us on a daily basis. And I think that's maybe the thing I'm most excited about in terms of like what's going to happen in the next year.
It's a great answer. Pinn?
And it's more like a prediction. So obviously, it's my own opinion,
Your
not
own opinion.
financial advice.
You have your legal disclaimer.
Yeah.
Disclaimer.
But are you selling a token?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I have two. One is I think in 2025 we'll probably be more decided on the form factor, which where we all will really realize the potential of AI. At Lightspeed, we obviously have a huge belief that it's going to be glasses. That's how we see the world. That's how we hear or like listen. So that's, but obviously there are other, there are pins and every other format, chat. But we really think that the world will align on kind of what you are wearing today, right? Like that should be the form factor.
I would love that.
Yeah. So Lightspeed has an investment for you.
Just
send it to you.
If you invest in companies, send me some glasses. That would be great.
Okay.
So that's one. And then I think from a value, I guess, where will it accrue? Actually, I'm really hoping, right? And I think it will really accrue at the talent level, right? At the researchers, at the most academic of people, because I really think that's what needs to take us in the next 4 to 5 years forward, right? Like, I mean, AI researchers should be earning what the US AI researchers are earning, right? $300,000 out of school, $2 million if you come out like DeepMind Google, because I really think that this is what these, if we want to make a real impact and like really like get on the way, like they are the people that really needs to be the most, they should benefit the most.
Really be included right from get-go.
Exactly, right? Just being included right from get-go and, just drive the innovation at that foundational level. And then, we can bring on these product people and the consultants, right? Like, and, I think they've enough role to play. Yeah.
Okay. Susli?
Okay, so, there are many things I want to say, but let me focus on maybe 3 things, right? One is, and I'm going to spin kind of what I think is going to be happening in 25 to what I hope we'll get more resolution on by 2025. One is the idea that AI is trained to seek coherence not necessarily truth. And for me, I often kind of think about what that implies, right? Because private actors are not necessarily trained, skilled, or incentivized to seek truth necessarily, right? That's not kind of how things are structured. But coherence doesn't necessarily mean truth. And so as we develop these technologies, naturally, right, the data that we feed into it, the idea that it's going to replace all kinds of creative thought or even, decision making, et cetera, where I think truth could be quite an important element to preserve. How do we grapple with that? Whether you are a regulator, a private actor, a public actor, or an individual. So that's kind of one element. The second one is, just as mobile, social, and cloud kind of gave birth to a whole, not just companies and unicorns and technologies, but fundamentally kind of rewrote the way we interact with each other. I think AI has that potential, right? And with the advent of mobile, apparently, we don't spend a lot of time like in real life anymore, right? Like the way we communicate shifted to virtual. With AI, there's now the possibility of not just human to human interaction, but human to AI and AI to AI.
Yeah.
Like what does that mean? Like I can't fully comprehend yet what that means for the fundamentals of what it means to relate. When it comes to trust building, when it comes to building connections. I was reading and I forgot where I read this from, but somebody said, a VC in the US said, loneliness is 1,000% an area that VCs are going to want to invest in, right? That's going to be a real problem. And how does all this technology that seemingly makes us more connected to each other actually kind of adds or detracts away from what makes us human, right? So that's the second element. And I think the third one, there's no doubt that the development of AI is going to consume a lot of resources, electricity and water. Like all these data centers are going to consume a lot of resources to give us that computing power. And I think this could be a double-edged sword. There may be also a good spillover effect here for us to then push towards what does it mean for developing more responsible resources. I think all of the folks that are building in data centers are going to want clean energy, for instance, right? And so Southeast Asia being the carbon sink that we are, being where a lot of natural resources are, I'm hoping that some of that technological innovation will also come to this part of the world and push us towards, a more sort of green economy.
Oh, absolutely. I want to channel my 8-year-old son's favorite character, that with big data comes big responsibility. And there's a lot of work. Although there's excitement and there's inertia and there's positive energy going into the space, there are lots still of questions that need left to be answered. And the only way we can help solve for those is by collaborating, by talking. We're still going to be around. Come speak to us, and we are happy to keep the conversation going. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
It was a privilege for me. I learned a lot. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for having
Thank you.
us.
Thanks, Kunal.